Hi, for people just joining, we're going to wait a minute or two while people are just finishing other meetings and coming on to this one. A very warm welcome. We'll get going in a couple of minutes. If you are just joining and you're hearing silence, that's not wrong. We're just waiting for another minute while people join, and then we'll get going. Okay, a very warm welcome to everyone joining us. We know we have people registered to join this event from more than 40 countries today, and I think people are still joining. But we only have 1 hour, so we will get going now. So a very warm welcome to today's session on the national plans to end violence against children from Colombia, Finland, and Japan. My name's Howard Taylor. I am the Executive Director of the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children, and we are convening you all for today's event. Welcome. We have a great lineup today of senior experts from each of those governments, Colombia, Finland, and Japan. And I will introduce each of those later just before they speak and share their national action plans to end violence against children. And the purpose of today very much is to hear from them, hear directly from these government officials at the front line, all three of them from pathfinding countries within the End Violence Partnership across 3 different continents. And they're going to share with us their processes, the learnings, and successes and challenges of developing their national action plans, as well as giving us a glimpse into some of their forward-looking national priorities to end violence against children. Pathfinding countries within the End Violence Partnership are those whose government leaders make a public commitment to comprehensive action across and beyond government to end all violence and abuse of children. And with 18 months of becoming a pathfinding government, there's an expectation that those governments will take 5 critical actions, one of which is to develop and implement an evidence-based national action plan to tackle violence against children. And Colombia, Finland, and Japan, who will share their plans and progress with us today, all recently completed and launched their national action plan. So we're going to hear from them and their experts from those governments fresh, where their national action plans are fresh and being implemented right now. So the agenda for the next hour is to have a brief presentation from each of those 3 pathfinding countries, and then have a Q&A, a question and answer session. And there's an opportunity for you all as you listen. If there are thoughts, if there are questions, if there are suggestions, reflections that you have, please do share them in the chat box, in the chat function, and we'll do our best to cover them during the conversation. If not, we will pick up on them after the hour that we have together today. So before I hand to our experts from the governments of Colombia, Finland, and Japan, it's my great pleasure to hand to Dr. Etienne Krug, the Director of the Department for Social Determinants of Health at the World Health Organization. Etienne is also a co-chair of the Executive Committee and a member of the board of the End Violence Partnership. Etienne's going to share with us some of the headline findings from the WHO's Global Status Report on preventing violence against children. Etienne.
Thanks so much, Howard, and good day to all of you colleagues, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate in this discussion. And a big thanks, of course, to the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children for organizing this discussion, and to the governments of Colombia, Finland, and Japan, first of all, for having had for having developed their plans and launched them, but also for participating in this discussion today. I'm particularly happy actually to open this event for two reasons. One is because we at WHO believe deeply in the importance of government's leadership and policy framework to help guide action at the national level. And second, because we also believe very much in the usefulness in cross-fertilization, in learning from one country to another. And the three plans that we're going to be hearing about today are really excellent documents, which I think, based on their experience of developing and using them, could help hopefully many others to develop and launch and use their own national plans. Before talking about those plans, I think it's important to remember that 1 in 2 children suffer physical, sexual, or emotional violence or neglect every year. And even if we know those statistics, they have to be remembered every time we start such an event because they're huge. And when we think about the multiple consequences on brain development, on physical and mental health, on infectious diseases such as HIV, on delayed cognitive development, early pregnancies, communicable and non-communicable diseases, we are talking about a huge public health problem and social problem, which is widespread all over the world, and we need to tackle it. So I'm very happy we're here to talk about it because we also know it can be prevented. And this was recognized by all member states when they adopted target 16.2 in the Sustainable Development Goals, to basically calls for ending all forms of violence against children by 2030. And to do so, we know the solutions. They are described in the so-called Inspire 7 Strategies to End Violence Against Children framework, which was developed by WHO, CDC, PEPFAR, Together for Girls, the Global Partnership, UNICEF, UNODC, USAID, and the World Bank a few years ago. This Inspire framework is key if we are to tackle violence against children. And for those who don't know it, every letter, of the Inspire word does stand for a specific strategy. I for implementation and enforcement of laws, N for changing norms and values, S for developing safe environments, P for parent and caregiver support, second I for income and economic strengthening, the R for response and support services, and the E for education and life skills. Each of these strategies is super important. And to make sure that these strategies are implemented, which we already know they are in more than 70 countries, we need a comprehensive national plan. And it's not only necessary to have a plan, it's also necessary to have a good plan. The recent WHO Global Status Report on Violence Against Children showed that 80% of countries report having a plan, but only the minority, about 20%, report that these plans are funded and have adequate targets to be met. So we are calling in this event today for looking again at that. We know that we want to implement the Inspire framework, but we want every country to have a national plan funded and have the adequate targets that go with it in order to ensure that it is clear what needs to happen and who needs to do what. This is why I'm so happy we have this event today, because we need to learn from governments like Colombia, Finland, and Japan who have done it, who have developed and launched their plan and are in the process of using it. So thanks so much to the three governments for being there, sharing their experiences, all of you for learning from it. And we certainly look forward to work with you on having more and better plans all over the world. Have a great discussion. Thank you.
Fantastic. Etienne, thank you so much. And that was really powerful, calling out the need for government leadership, but also this kind of event where we can share lessons between governments and between continents who have put plans together based on the evidence that exists. Solutions and evidence does exist in the Inspire strategies. And I liked your finishing point really about we need a plan, but we need a good plan. And the plans need to be funded and they need to have targets. So that helps with the monitoring, the measurement, the implementation. Thank you so much. I think that's a really good setup for what I hope we're going to hear from 3 good plans, national action plans to end violence against children. So I want to invite, first of all, Lina Maria Abeles, who is the Director General of the Colombian Family Welfare Institute. Lina is also a member of the End Violence Partnership Executive Committee. Lina.
Howard, thanks a lot for the introduction, for all the leading process that you have made around the world, evidencing the correlation that it's between protecting and getting away the notion of violence against children with development. And of course, for Etienne, for this magnificent introduction and the general key points. Of course, I would like to greet as well my 2 colleagues from Finland and Japan, and to say it's a real honor for Colombia to be sharing what we have been doing in our national action plan to end any type of violence against children. First of all, giving a general panorama, I would like to say that this is the population of youngsters in Colombia. We have more than 13,511,000 under 18. In vulnerable conditions and vulnerable situations, we have more than 5.5 million children. And of course, ICBF, it's the entity in charge to generate welfare to those vulnerable populations. And we are attending more than 2.2 million kids. For Colombia, there is a direct correlation between investment in childhood and the country's development. And this is why we have understood that there is a co-responsibility between family, society, and government to generate elements and public policies, programs, and of course, general conditions to protect our children. There are 2 elements in our law. One, it's Article 44 of our Constitution that states that the rights of children are above everyone else. And the other one, it's the law and code of Childhood and Adolescence Code, Law 1098 of 2006. In the Colombian government's, we have a general we are committed to decrease violence against children since our national development plan. We committed in 2018 to decrease or decline the rate of violence against children in 14.3%, and of course achieve sustainable development goal 16.2 to by 2030 eradicate any type of violence against children. But of course we had to understand what was happening in a country, and that's the reason why we created or took the survey on violence against children and adolescents in 2018 to understand what was happening in our country. Of course, having a general concern of the reality of the territories in Colombia, we unfortunately had devastating results. More than 41% of the under 18 estimated that they had been violated on their rights, or physically, psychologically, or sexually abused. Of those, 70% of the violations occur under their homes, the supposedly protective environment that has to exist. And of course, it was very striking to our eyes, and that 77% of the parents in Colombia understood physical punishment as a proper way to correct and raise up children. This gave us the elements to understand that we had to create a national commitment around an alliance to prevent violence. And that's the reason we addressed the Global Alliance in 2019. In this alliance, President Duque stated and manifested that ICBF was the entity and the institution that was going to be in charge to coordinate the response of the national government, the regional governments, and the international cooperation and civil society organizations to address a national plan to end violence against children. What does that, and why he pretended that ICBF addressed the plan? Because we are the entity in charge of generating well-being through the course of life, meaning we are the ones that take into the territory early childhood education. We are in charge of nutrition, undernutrition or malnutrition to under 5 years old. We are in charge of preventing risk in childhood from 6 to 13. And we are the ones also in charge to generate the public policies to address the talents of the youngsters in our country. And of course, to work around with families, generating protective real environments. That's why the first thing that we do was to adequate the INSPIRE model to the Colombian context. And we then formulated and generate a process for the creation of the National Action Plan. First, we did a consultation process from September to December 2020. Here we had 32, we had several workshops and consultations. We got with 32 governmental agencies, with intersectorial committees, the civil society. We heard, and this is very much in importance, the children of our country in 123 meetings with them. We had 14 institutional and international cooperation agencies, and these gave us a period of time to adjust the plan. And the plan was approved in June 2021. It was approved with 184 initiatives, 115 from public institutions, 49 from the civil society, and 20 from international cooperation agencies. This is a resume, sneak peek of our plan. We understood that we had to create protective environments in every single space where children interact. But the first space, it's the individuality of each single kid in our country. We need to address their subjects of rights from the beginning, since the early stages. Then we address home as a protective environment by priority and excellence. Public spaces, the institutions, meaning educational institutions, churches, the health system, and of course, and not last but not least, the digital scenario. This also had, and Howard mentioned it, we had to address this national plan, of course, budgetarily wise, and we target every single activity that we had to do for the next 4 years till 2024, and the cost is $162 million for the next 4 years. But we also understood the importance of working with regional governments. So our National Action Plan recognizes that specificities of territorial needs, cultural and local customs, local institutionality capacities. And that's why we started addressing and implementing this National Action Plan, also territorially wise, going bottom up. This is the reason why we have already approved 10 national family welfare system plans in the territories, 15 that are being in the process of adjustment, but to be approved. And there are 7 that are in process of formulation. So we have presence and plans in the 32 departments of Colombia. So we have had a lot of achievements and good achievements being part of this global alliance. First is that we have been able to modify legal framework. We approved Law 2025 of 2020, that it's school parenting to address institutions as protective environments. We approved Law 2081 of 2021 that talks about imprescriptibility of sexual violence against children. We approved Law 2089, that it's a prohibition of use of any type of physical punishment, cruel and humiliating or degrading treatments to children, raising them up. And we also adopt Law 2137, that it's the National Early Warning System to prevent sexual violence against children and adolescents. But we have been also, and this is very much important, and I think we are going to address this in the next questions that are going to be addressed to the national governments that are present in this magnificent event, and it's institutional strengthening. And this is very much what we have been doing. And of course, I would like to end with a phrase that we also state in several scenarios, and it's that a country that invests and protects the children and adolescents is destined to be great. Thank you.
Fantastic, Lena. Well, that's an informative and inspirational start. And in the interest of time, I won't try and repeat everything you said, but I think there were 2 or 3 things I really wanted to pull out, because in sharing the importance of the Violence Against Children survey, the data that's important. So you have the best practice globally from the Inspire strategies, but you need that local, national data to inform the preparation of the plan. And there's also a piece of political bravery in there, because the data shows the prevalence, the high prevalence of violence and abuse of children. And so when you make the political commitment, when the political leaders make that commitment, I always think there's a brave aspect to that, because they're saying, look, we are acknowledging we have an issue and we are going to do something about it. And I think the National Alliance you mentioned, and also that critical piece about involving children and getting their voices, their perspectives. I think you said 123 meetings with children as part of your plan preparation. Wow. Okay. We must move on. Thank you, Lena. We will come back to you in the conversation to follow. But we're now going to go to Finland, where I'm delighted to welcome Maria, the Councillor of the Finnish Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. Mario.
Thank you. So nice to be part of the meeting and this important event. I'm just switching off my presentation. And for some reason it's not going like I planned, but I hope this is visible to you.
We can see that now.
Great. So our action plan is very strongly based on the rights of the child, and also in our perspective and in our plan, the inclusion and the cooperation with the wide different stakeholders is of key importance. Our action plans also deals with the factors that protect children against violence, as well as the risk factors and their consequences. We have in total 93 actions included in our plan, and we have, because it's like a handbook, we have 14 chapters that are dealing with the prevention of emotional and physical violence, also the sexual violence from 3 different perspectives. There is the prevention, there is the minimizing harmful impact and providing treatment, and then there is the main focus on prevention. You can see the picture of our plan here. The main objective is to prevent violence against children under 18 in different growth and operating environments. We think that it's important to pay attention to all of those different environments. And the aim is to improve the position of the child victim in the current service, care and crime systems, but also to take into account those children who are at risk of ending up using or have already used violence themselves. And we really think also that all need to be aboard. The plan takes into account issues that are related to children that are in particularly vulnerable situations. For example, disabled children or children in alternative care. The plan emphasizes the importance of multidisciplinary cooperation, and it can be done in very different ways. We have had a broad group of experts from various organizations. All of our key ministries are involved and behind our plan, and also the NGOs quite rarely. Those all wrote the action plan. We also have now a steering group that was nominated by the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare that is responsible for monitoring and directing the objectives and actions. This year we will have one evaluation. You can also see here the contents of the action plan. I'm not going to go through them, but just to give you a glimpse of all of those 14 chapters that I mentioned. There is quite many things in each of these chapters. But if you are interested, you can go behind these links. Our action plan is available online, also in Swedish, if you can use that language, but in English, here's the direct link you can have. So thank you.
Mario, thank you so much for that. I think it's really, you brought to life in a powerful way the comprehensive nature of these plans. 14 chapters, 93 actions, and the criticality of the process and that multidisciplinary nature of involving multiple ministries of government as well as beyond government as well. I think that's really powerful. And I think what's important and what maybe already emerges, while we have global best practice in the INSPIRE strategies, of course, the context in which that is applied and the national action plan is prepared and informed is really important. So the national data, but the national context. And there's not, it's not a one size fits all approach, but there are some things that we know and we're already seeing, I think, from Lena and Mario's presentation, some of the key ingredients that are necessary for the process as well as the product, the plan that comes out of that process. Thank you so much, Mario. We're now going to go to Japan. It is nearly 10:30 at night on a Friday night. It's the weekend in Japan nearly already. And the Japanese government have kindly pre-recorded their presentation, which we are going to hear now from Mr. Shimijun, who is the Ambassador for Human Rights from the government of Japan.
My name is Shimijun. I'm Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary for Human Rights Affairs of Japan. It's my honor to have this opportunity to deliver a statement on behalf of the Japanese government. I'd like to thank Executive Director Taylor and the End Violence Secretariat for organizing this important event. Violence against children can have significant impacts on children's physical and psychological development. Its prevention is a critical challenge that all of society need to tackle. Japan has making every effort to achieve target 16.2 of the SDGs, namely to end abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and all forms of violence against and the torture of children. Since Japan became a pathfinding country of the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children in February 2018, we have been actively engaged in the activities of the End Violence Partnership as a member of the board. In August 2021, after a series of discussions among various stakeholders, we formulated Japan National Action Plan to End Violence Against Children. The English version of our National Action Plan has just been published on the End Violence Partnership's website. But let me explain very briefly of the plan and its background. Japan Action Plan focuses on 4 priority areas: child abuse, sexual exploitation, bullying, and corporal punishment. These areas were identified by the Roundtable on Ending Violence Against Children and its working group consisting of multiple stakeholders, including government officials, experts, civil society, and the private sector. The action plan also refers to our efforts to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on children from the perspective of the increased risk of child abuse and other forms of violence against children during the pandemic. I would also like to highlight that in the course of the developing our action plan, we have heard children's voices and concerns about violence. The Japan Committee for UNICEF and the Yahoo Japan Corporation, both members of the Roundtable, invited public comments from children online and received 933 responses from children. The responses suggested that children recognize violence as a compelling problem. When children were asked, "Have you or has anyone around you been subject to or witnessed violence?" 68% of the respondents answered yes. Many of the children said that they would like adults to notice children's signal for help and listen carefully to children's voices. We have formulated the action plan based on these opinions and will take them into account when considering relevant measures in the future. We have made a child-friendly version of the action plan too, which also includes government hotline number for consultations. In addition, I'd like to note that our action plan refers to INSPIRE, the 7 strategies for ending violence against children, which was developed by the World Health Organization. In terms of the implementation, the Roundtable and its working group will annually evaluate and monitor the implementation of the action plan. It will be reviewed after about 3 years. During the review, we will hear opinions from children and endeavor to take these voices into account. Maybe I should stop here not to go into too much detail, but I encourage you to take a look at our national action plan on the website and so on. This is because we have created the action plan to end violence against children, not only in Japan, but also in other countries through sharing Japan's practice and efforts in each area contained in the action plan. Japan is determined to make every effort to help achieve target 16.2 of the SDGs in order to build a better world where every child can grow up in a violence-free environment and have hopes and dreams for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Shimijun from Japan. I'll just highlight a couple of things said in those remarks. One is, I think, developing a national plan is always contextual to what's going on at the time. And the ambassador mentioned, of course, that the plan was prepared during the COVID-19 pandemic. And secondly, the criticality that he mentioned at the end of ongoing evaluation, of tracking, of monitoring, and where necessary, adjustments to that. We're now going to move into the question, the conversation, the Q&A. Do please keep putting any questions, comments, suggestions you have in the chat. But I'm delighted to invite Stella Ayo Odongo, who is the Pathfinding Coordinator within the End Violence Partnership, to moderate this session. Stella.
Thank you very much, Howard, and thank you to our presenters, Lina, Mario, and the Ambassador pre-recorded for sharing your experiences in developing the National Plan of Action. I just want us to delve a little deeper into the National Plans of Actions. If you were to pick one, and I'll start with Japan, because as mentioned earlier, Japan is pre-recorded. If we were to pick one action or one priority that you would implement in the National Plan of Action in the next 2 years, what would that be? I'll start with Japan, then I'll come to Lina from Colombia, and then I'll end with you, Mario. So let's hear from Japan.
Yes, our priority is that we will ensure that measures included in our action plan will be implemented with a view to achieving the SDGs target 16.2. As an end violence partnership pathfinding country, Japan is committed to further enhancing momentum to end violence against children against the globe through disseminating Japanese practices and efforts in each area contained in the action plan.
Thank you. I think it's clear that Japan looks at presenting a global picture and reaching out with those experiences to end violence across the globe. Let's hear from Lina. What would be that #1 priority in the next 2 years from the plan?
Stella, thanks a lot. I think I would like to highlight 2 main streams that we have to address as a country. One, of course, I think the real the reality. It's to make the whole society understand that there is a direct correlation between violence against children and the type of country we are building up. If we don't understand that correlation, we are not advancing at all. The opportunity of having a new humanity relies entirely on those new generations. And if those new generations are striked by violence, physically, psychologically, and sexually, we are building a pathway of not profitable and holistic human development. And this is a huge homework that we have to do, a huge task. We have to really understand that there is a need to change norm, cultures, and values in our society. And the second, due to our political panorama where we have elections, it's to make the transition with a new government.
Wonderful. It's interesting that you're already factoring in the event of a change of government and a specific item in the Inspire strategies, which involves the norms and values. I'll now move to Finland. 93 actions, 14 chapters. What are those one or two priorities that you'll implement in these 2 years? Mario.
Well, I have to say, yeah, thank you. Well, I have to say that in our perspective, all of those actions are equally important because we have a wide steering group and that already supported the preparation of the plan and now is responsible for the monitoring and evaluation of it. And it's important that all of those different stakeholders, especially the ministries and the expert organizations, they are truly committed to the implementation and that they all found, together with the NGOs, those actions that they can join in and implement them so they can take it as their own. And like I previously said, all aboard is the number one step in our implementation of the plan, and also the children and young ones themselves.
Wow, and this is the essence of the partnership, that we look at plans not just to be implemented by one agency, that the agenda to end violence against children is multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder, and it's interesting to see that all of you are going to be involved in the implementation of this. I'll now move to the next question. And the next question is just to delve deep in the challenges. What challenges did you experience in developing these national plans of actions? Of course, it sounds so rosy and good, but definitely there are challenges that you'd like to share. And if there are any, how are you able to mitigate them? I will again start with Japan and then move to the rest later. Over to Japan.
Yes. There were two challenges in the process of developing our action plan. One is how to incorporate all relevant elements into the action plan, and the other is how we can hear children's opinions. To address the first challenge, we had discussions in an inclusive manner, we believe. Not only government officials, but also experts, civil society groups, and the private sector have participated in meetings to identify priority areas, issues to be addressed in ending violence against children in Japan. We have worked shoulder to shoulder to find a way to formulate the Japanese National Action Plan. To hear children's opinions, second challenge I mean, the Japan Committee for UNICEF and the Yahoo Japan Corporation have played a significant role in organizing children's public comment, building upon their existing resources and networks. The call for children's public comment was made on the website of the Yahoo Kids and the Japan Committee for UNICEF, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Japan. As a result, we have received over more than 900 responses from children.
Wow, great to see that the challenge that you experience is already being addressed, and the voices of children, you are able to publish the questions on the website, and you received all the responses. This is really, really interesting. I'll now move to Colombia. Lina, what were those challenges that you experienced and how were you able to mitigate this?
Estela, I think that the challenges are not only when we're building up the National Action Plan. I think the challenges will continue through the implementation of our plan, because we precisely are talking, and I see in the chat, elements of cultural and norms and values that has been acquired in society through years, through decades, through really horrible standards that have not precisely given us the proper tools to address the protection of children in our countries. And precisely, I think that this is one of the things that we encounter, for example, when we're trying to pass the bill that prohibits any type of punishment to kids while they are being raising up. And it's that, for example, parents were really critic that government was, with the law, trying to interfere with the type of education that they were giving at home. And this is the concept that children are from the parents and not part of a general society. So this was one of the things, the most difficult things that we have been addressing. And I think that it will continue to be addressed while the implementation of the plan. And we have developed several strategies. One is educational and social awareness based on evidence and data, as we have shown, that demonstrates actually that the long-term negative effects of violence in children along the course of life. Also having the voice of the children as the highlights and at the center has been essential. And we have been, of course, having media campaigns addressing the transformation of imaginaries and belief that has naturalized violence. And the other element that we have been doing to address this challenge, it's of course the national commitment, the political commitment, the national regional government commitments. It's quite important. And how are we addressing this? We are entering and we are trying to address and to impact the national and regional action plans or development plans of the municipalities, departments, and of course the national government to have the element of ending violence as a trigger to development, social, economic development. And finally, the being able to put resources, real and tangible resources that construct and have the possibility of really implementing the plan in the national level, but also in regional wise.
Thank you. I think you've brought a new dimension, that the integration of these national plans of action across the regions, across development plans is critical. You also mentioned the need to invest and real investment in the implementation of these plans, that it will not be translated into reality for children if we do not invest the actual resources for their implementation. Mario, your perspective on the challenge and how you mitigated it.
Yeah, thank you. Finland has several strategies and action plans that are in the area of preventing and combating violence against children. The Nonviolent Childhood Action Plan is of key importance, but then we also have, for example, National Child Strategy. And it is important to try to have all the key actors involved, but to also make these different action plans and strategies in a way that they complement each other, so that we are not competing for the limited resources. They are limited in somehow anyway, and that we have the best concrete effects for the children's lives. And in our experience, the steering group plays a key role in this, so that we are not competing. And also that there is very important to have a coordinator. In our case, it is International Institute for Health and Welfare that has the coordinating role. And I just want to say that that is important.
Excellent. Like they say, if you do not have, if there are so many pieces moving around and there's no coordination center, then the center will not hold and everything falls apart. Importance of coordination, importance of the steering group in steering the implementation of this plan is critical. Thank you so very much. I'll now move to the last question, but thank you to the participants who've received a couple of questions that I'll also pose to the panelists. One question that I would like to put to you is what experiences would you share? What lessons would you like to share with pathfinding countries or non-pathfinding countries that are listening in terms of the process of developing the national plan, the national action plan, the costing, and if the implementation has started, the implementation? What are those lessons that you would want to share? I'll start with Japan.
Yes, a national action plan should be tailor-made and country-specific, as the situation of violence against children differs from country to country. However, from our experience, we could say that the national action plan should be at least inclusive, child-centered, and subject to monitoring and review. We formulated a national action plan in an inclusive manner based on the discussions as a roundtable on ending violence against children. We heard children's voices through children's public comment and made a child-friendly version of the action plan. We'll ensure that action plan will be implemented through annual monitoring and a review in 3 years. I hope those points would be helpful for other pathfinding countries when they formulate their national action plans.
Definitely critical to any plan is you plan, but you also track its performance. So monitoring in 3 years is critical, and also involving children and giving them a child-friendly version. That would actually make us as practitioners or as duty bearers accountable to children. Lina, what are the lessons that you'd like to share in terms of process, developing, costing, and even implementing the plan? If there are any.
Thank you, Stella. One of the things I would like to start by saying then and stating that I love about these meetings is that we also learn in this process. And I just heard Japan that they had the child-friendly version of the plan. We do not. We're gonna do that right away. And this is part of being part of this global alliance. It strengthens the national plans in each single country, and it shows and evidence the highlights that we can make and the changes that we can make. So addressing the question, we need one of the first things that I think it's important to do, and one lesson that we have had, it's the need to institutionalize the national action plan, because this would allow its continuity despite, for example, government transitions. In this regard, we have, for example, formalized a group legally wise conformed in ICBF to oversee and implement the NAP across the years, and of course till 2024, that it's the timeline of action. The second element is to have a regulatory framework where, for example, as I showed, all the laws that have been passed from 2019 are linked to the end violence approach and to the national action plan. And the third one, as I have been mentioning across the other questions, it's the territorialization of the NAP in the 32 departments that Colombia has. You cannot have a plan addressed from the national level and foresee that it's going to be implemented by national authorities, so by territorial authorities. So it's quite important. Of course, the costing of the NAP, it's to identify funding sources of all in all the actions that are in our plan. In our plan, it's 184 actions. All of them are fully funded. So this is quite important. And of course, to have a fully funded of the national department plans, action plans. And the other element of implementing the National Action Plan is to have common agreements and priorities based on data and evidence. And of course, keeping up the voice of the children in every single element of the construction and implementation of the plan. It's important. And of course, as Japan said, to have a monitoring and evaluating process of how we're doing. Thanks a lot, Stella.
I'm looking at my clock and I'm worried about time. Let me go straight to Mario, just to give key lessons for pathfinding countries and non-pathfinding countries during the process of development, implementation, and also costing. What are the lessons that other countries can pick from
Thank you. So in our perspective, there needs to be a balance between taking actions in a project funding and also as a part of different stakeholders' permanent job. So for example, it is critical in our opinion that different kind of health clinics, maternity, child health clinic services, school health services, and so on, also in the early childhood education units, there are professionals that need to pay attention to the signs of the violence in everyday life when they are in contact with the children and their families. But there need to be also awareness nursing, and it can be boosted in different ways. For example, by training the professionals and raising the awareness of the participation and the rights of the children and young themselves, and that may require separate funding, but the balance is in key importance.
Thank you very much. Now there are questions that have come in the chat, and I'd like to thank participants for actively engaging. I would like to throw this back to you, Mario, and maybe Lina. Let me start with Mario. The question is, how do you raise awareness to involve and commit the entire collective to transform a problem that is cultural? I think the person is acknowledging that the problem of ending violence against children is cultural, and how do you then raise this awareness to cause the transformation that requires and involve everybody else? Mario?
Thank you. I think it needs the involvement of different stakeholders and long-term work, so that it cannot be done in just a couple of months or a couple of years. It needs to have a long perspective, and also to educate many people about what are the children's rights and how we can all do something to advance those.
Lina? Thank you, Mario. Lina?
Well, as I said before, I think that, and I'm here, I'm not gonna only talk of like a public servant that I am, and as a director general of ICBF, but as a mom. And I guess that if we ask every single parent if we want our kids to be happy and to be excellent in whatever domain they want to be, we have to evidence that there is impacts and effects of violence on development, on the brain development and the social emotional skills development. So this is one of the things that we've been addressing, and it's to make parents, and of course, as Malicia just said, we have to educate also teachers, educational agents. We have to educate every single member of our society to understand that the negative effects of violence on development. I think that everyone is aware that we are in a competition to be economically profitable as countries, but if we don't understand that human development has to be addressed as a whole and as a key element for economic and territorial development, we won't have any chance of being a different society and a different world.
Thank you. I still see the chat room very, very active. There's a question on masculinity. I'll now, with the time not being on our side, I'll now hand back to Howard. We have 6 minutes to the top of the hour, and I'd like to hand back to Howard to address some of the highlights on the questions that were raised, but there's also one that has just popped up on masculinity. Over to you, Howard. And thank you so much to Lina and Mario, and thank you to Japan for sending the recorded responses in advance. And we really, really appreciate your presence in this call. Thank you very much. Over to you, Howard.
Thank you, Stella, and thanks everyone. Yeah, there's one question I saw in the chat, which was asking what happens if my country is a pioneering country but doesn't approve the action plan. If the action plan takes a long time to be launched, if there are political changes or personnel changes, etc. And I think really there, it's about the tenacity and the support, and we as a partnership would be very happy to offer encouragement, and we engage governments at different levels, right from the head of government through to technical officials and others who are involved, and of course, civil society, who I think play a really important role in raising their voices and holding governments to account for what they've committed to, including children as part of civil society. So if there's anything that we can do, please do get in touch with us separately on that particular one. But I think there's a broader generic point there. about how we make progress. And I think it's come out a little bit of some of what Lena's been talking about with political change, etc. We need to make ending violence against children an issue which is apolitical, it's bipartisan. It doesn't matter who is in government, they don't have a choice but to continue with a commitment or make a commitment, continue a commitment, and continue to make progress. And I sometimes feel that's about we need to win the battle of heads, hearts, and hands. Another way of thinking about heads, hearts, and hands is that ending violence against children is smart, right, and possible. The right piece is the heart piece. It's the right of a child. It's enshrined in international conventions and national law that children should be free to grow up free from violence. The hands piece is the possible. We have evidence. We have the Inspire strategies. We have other evidence bodies too, but we know enough about what works to get this done. But then the head piece, I think, is the smart piece where we need to be better, both globally and I think nationally sometimes as well, at making the investment case, because political leaders face a lot of competing choices, perhaps more so than ever in the current climate economically, and therefore making the case for investment, why it makes sense to invest, particularly to prevent violence, abuse, and exploitation of children. Because we know that if we don't do that, we've heard the shocking prevalence figures from some of the countries who have spoken today. We know that violence and abuse against children is incredibly widespread. We know it has multi-year, sometimes lifelong implications for those children, but it also undermines all the other investments being made in children, whether that's in health, education, socioeconomic development, and their future participation in the labour market and the economy. So I think we have to move heads with the investment case, as well as moving hearts, because it's right that children should go up free from violence, and sharing the hands piece, if you'll excuse the extension of the metaphor, that hands, we have the solutions. Let me just close today's conversation by echoing another very big thank you to Etienne from the World Health Organization, Lena Mario Shimijun from Colombia, from Finland, and from the government of Japan for their sharing, and to everyone who has joined today's conversation. I think it's very true that we are always learning. Lena, I think, mentioned this just now. I've learned things from listening to our speakers today, seeing the questions that have come in. And that's very much, I think, what we as a community of practice and champions for ending violence against children are doing. We are always learning. I hope that, like me, you have therefore been informed and also inspired by today's conversation. I think having the sharing of the priorities, the challenge, the lessons from Colombia, Finland, and Japan has been incredibly valuable. And the development of a national action plan really is only a staging moment on a journey, maybe even the beginning of a journey that we've heard requires strong leadership, multi-stakeholder involvement, the voices of children, the participation of children, but as well as technical capacity. And as Etienne said at the start, we must make sure that the national plans are good and they need to be financed, they need to be implemented, but need to be measured, monitored, and evaluated as well. So there's a lot to do. And I think Finland, the sharing of the 14 chapters, the 93 actions, this is a big job to get done, but it's important for children, and it makes economic sense and more to do it, as I said just now, with regards to ending violence against children being right, smart, and possible. We see across the 37 pathfinding governments within the End Violence Partnership, the progress is uneven. And that's why, again, to emphasize this kind of learning, sharing between countries, sharing across continents is so important as we're all trying to scale up the implementation of the Inspire strategies. Two things to say finally. There's a lot more information available on the End Violence Partnership website. The address has been shared in the chat. Otherwise, just Google End Violence Partnership and you'll come across it. You can see the Inspire strategies. You can see the national action plans. I think we now even have the Japanese national action plan in Japanese. Thank you to the government of Japan for sharing that, and much more information. And my final thing to close with is an advert for an event coming up next Tuesday, which is the Together to End Violence Leaders event. This is the culmination of 18 months of events all over the world as part of the Together to End Violence Solution Summit series and campaign. 40 leaders, including 5 or 6 heads of government, survivors, children, UN agencies and others, and celebrities, royalty, will be sharing the progress that they are seeing and making and the commitments they have to end violence against children. And I know we already have participants registered from more than 135 countries. And there's a little time hack here, which even if you can't spare the 2 hours or so next Tuesday when the event will take place, do go onto our website and register, because then you will receive the highlights video of the event when that issues a few days after the event. But let me just thank again all of our speakers. Let me thank Stella for moderating and the team within the End Violence Partnership and the governments of Colombia, Finland, Japan, and WHO for all the work putting this event together. To be continued. Thank you, everybody.
Ciao.
Ciao.